Shaken and Stirred by Sharon Deere of Sydney 1230, narrated by Janine Penfold. There was a strange, eerie stillness in the early morning air as I leaned against the creaking wooden bench on the veranda of my grandparents' ageing, weatherboard home. My father and younger brother were loading the final pieces of furniture and several wooden tea chests of perfectly wrapped bric-a-brac into the removal van. Memories of the past swirled around in my head. This had been my grandparents' home for over 50 years, and now it was just a shell, dismissed by time. The heavy metal doors of the van slammed shut, jolting me out of my memories, reminding me why I was there. Sighing, I lifted my head and walked around the home, taking in the scene surrounding me for a final time. Gloomy shadows appeared as a milky mist dissolved. The old oak tree stood still, silent. Beneath my feet, a carpet of gold and orange autumn leaves. The old outhouse door swung on its rusted hinges, barely hanging, inviting no one now. It is 24th May 1968. I am 16 years old. A shout rang out in the distance, informing me it was time to get on our way. With a final look around, I jumped up into the front seat of the van, squeezing in next to my younger, blonde-haired brother, his face red and covered in sweat, sapped of energy from the heavy lifting in the early hours of the morning. Not yet a teen, he was exhausted, gratefully slumping into the van's cracked, brown leather seat. Slamming the door shut, my father turned the key in the ignition and started the engine. He leaned over my brother, his calloused fingers turning the dials of the radio with familiarity. Instantly, the sound of country music rang throughout the front cabin of the van. Singing loudly, we began the long journey from Westport to Christchurch to reunite my grandparents with their life's treasures. Snaking along the long, narrow, winding road was harrowing. Mountains covered in trees of green and brown rose alongside us as the van travelled slowly. Passing through the small, sparsely populated township of Inangahua Junction. My body leaned against the door, the steel handle digging into my side as I gazed outside. Lost in my own thoughts, I was suddenly shaken to attention by rumbling, thunderous, booming sounds. Looking out of the window, everything seemed so still. Glancing over towards my father, I noticed the worried lines on his forehead as he concentrated on driving, slowly edging forward to our next pit stop. We became aware of the rumbling sounds building, becoming more severe. Suddenly, the ground began shaking violently, the van moving precariously from side to side. The force of the shaking threw precious possessions into disarray as furniture crashed against the walls of the van's interior. Tension building, the shaking continued, deafening, shuddering the van. Gravel sprayed up against the windows as our bodies were tossed violently from side to side. My hazel green eyes, wide open with fear now, looked at my brother as my father, tightening his grip on the worn leather steering wheel, cautiously manoeuvred the van to a halt on the widest part of the road. Pulling on the handbrake, he gave a sigh of relief as the van came to a rest against the cold, grey wall of stone on the edge of the mountain gorge. The shaking subsided momentarily. Opening the door, frightened, we jumped out of the van, slamming the door, watching everything around us crumbling. Our shoes touched the gravel, crunching underfoot as the ground continued vibrating. The three of us, shaken, stood together, bracing for more alarming movement. Looking down a few feet from the van, we became aware the road had opened by the force of the tremors, and a wide, deep cavern of darkness appeared before us. Feeling trapped, we clung to each other, bruised and dazed. I held my breath, waiting as dark red blood oozing from a gash to my forehead, trickled down my cheek, tasting metallic as I licked my lips, praying for it to stop. As the tremor subsided, the vast landscape revealed the damage around us. Trees, once strong, stood there splintered apart. Behind us, rocks fell in abandonment, debris swirling through the air in the bitter cold wind. Constant, unnerving noise from tremors beneath us continued. The van's tyres, once blackened, were covered in a layer of dusty earth. Our shoes were scuffed, darkened by dust. Cautiously, we stepped up into the cabin of the van. We did not dare check for damage. The ignition key turned with swiftness, and the van, roaring to life, slowly moved forward as we began our journey away from the damaged town. Behind us, chaos as landslides cascaded down the mountains into ravines below. We drove past in silence alongside the road, witnessing rail lines of twisted metal and fallen power lines. Continuing the slow, tedious journey home, background images were swirling around in my head, a sense of disbelief, realising how fortunate we were, and so grateful to be safe. Surrounded by hills, in Angahua Junction was a sparsely populated town. The 7.1 earthquake had damaged and closed parts of the Bulla Gorge. I will never forget the impact of the landslides, leaving roads closed and townspeople evacuated. Bridges destroyed, buildings damaged, as the aftershocks triggered more destruction, leaving lasting impressions, ongoing fear. The impact felt and never forgotten. The end.